I think we should turn it over to Sarah and the team from the Steamboat Resort to give us an update on the resort pledge and where that stands, because I that's the main reason we're gathering this morning, if that works.
That works for me. Michael, does that
Go
work for
ahead,
you?
Sarah.
Okay. Thanks everybody. And with me from the Steamboat Altair team is Robert Lewandowski, who's our VP of Finance, and Luke Bonucci, who is Altair Legal. So, sorry, that's my coffee maker in the background. So appreciate everyone taking the time, and we recognize this is causing everyone to adjust schedules. So appreciate that. I mentioned this on our last meeting, with the many things happening from both RTA side and from ski corps side. Right, this pledge agreement has been condensed, and I think we had said we need to pause and really think about this in a thoughtful way. This is a big commitment, so we appreciate everybody working to adjust there. I want to start by saying our commitment to $1 million has not wavered. We are there, and I think, as I mentioned on our last call, we are committed to invest in a robust regional transportation system. And after our last call, I know that that's how everybody else feels as well. We are all committed. And I think this is an investment for us, and Roger can speak to how this is, a really big, this is a big investment for us. And so we see it that way. And we want to make sure that there are guardrails on that investment, and that everyone else is committed to this as well, to ensure that the RTA is successful and robust. So we also recognize that we are working within the constraints of government. We are a private entity, but you are all government, and that there are constraints with what you can and cannot do as we think about this investment. So working within those constraints and at a very high level, I think what we're asking for, and we talked about this at the last meeting, splitting payment January and August, ensuring our funding is impactful and goes to the best use. Also, we want accountability for those funds, understanding we recognize that we don't have a seat at the table as part of the RTA structure, but how can we feel good about knowing how that money is spent? So that accountability piece. And finally, as we've mentioned before, commitment that everybody has skin in the game, so we can really build out a really strong RTA program that we know that we need, and is a benefit obviously to the resort, but also to all of our communities.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm here to kind of reinforce that. I know, especially in the past 24, 48 hours, there's been a lot of conversations and probably a lot of interpretation of what those conversations mean. And as the head of finance for the ski resort, I want to reinforce what Sarah is saying to this group, because I think it's very important that we do remain fully committed to the full $1 million that we've signed up for. And we don't want whatever conversations have happened in the past 24 to 48 hours to be interpreted of us wavering. But as Sarah did say, as a private enterprise, we do have fiduciary obligations, which I think many of you understand, which needs to ensure that our company funds, have a clear business rationale and benefit, especially when the amount is as meaningful as $1 million. And so we don't want to interpret, some of those expectations and some of the questions or how the funds are being used as an indication that we're not committed by any means. And wanted you to hear that from a different voice, from somebody that's the head of
The one who's charge of money.
Yeah. So we're certainly happy to address any questions or concerns from this group, but we wanted to make sure that we're putting an explanation point on that, because we know that we recognize there's been maybe some misinterpretation here in the past couple of days.
And the other thing that I would add, and maybe this is getting into the weeds, I think that, I think this is going to take a little bit of to get us to our deadline. It's going to take a little bit of intense work together. I don't know, and Bill and I had a conversation about this. If we set up some kind of structure where it's maybe a smaller group, and then we bring it back to the larger group. So the expectation, we appreciate everybody being on this call this morning, but uh, recognizing that it might be difficult to get everyone scheduled for the work that's going to need to be done.
Just a follow-up question on that. So why is this happening now, right? So Steamboat's been at the table on this for months since the outset. It sounds like you've had some broad structural concerns from the outset, but we on the government and business side partners are hearing about this just before the ballot question, right? So
Yeah.
it's, if there are scheduling difficulties, those could have been worked out 9 months ago.
Yes, and that's a great question, and I did talk about that at the last meeting a little bit, which is, there's lots of things that have been happening. We have been negotiating with the city on our transit contribution, and we were not going to move forward with the pledge agreement until we had gotten that nailed down. And then we had travel. And so really we didn't, and I will also take blame of, you know, we were given the pledge agreement a few weeks ago, and at the last RTA meeting, I said, so what's the schedule? And who are we negotiating with? And it, it's due next Tuesday. And so with Dave's and Rob's travel schedule, I essentially talked to Dave on Friday, sent an email out on Saturday, and it was like, wait a minute, we can't get this done in 3 or 4 days. So there are several things that have caused this, but I think we're here. We want to make sure we're getting this done, and we're going to need some help to get us there, and we're looking for you all to help us. And this is a big commitment on our part. And yes, you are right. This discussion has been happening for a while. I think exactly what this looks like is this last week's discussion. And so that's where we are now. And now we need to move forward. And so, and yes, a commitment is a commitment. And we have been committed, but exactly what this looks like, what are the details? That's where we are now. And that's the part that we want to make sure we get right.
Yeah, I'll just reinforce, a lot of things, right? The devil is in the details. And the first time that this surfaces looking at a first draft of a pledge agreement. And that's what prompted a number of questions and realizing, okay, it's important for all parties to be aligned on what those expectations are. So that draft pledge agreement prompted a lot of those questions.
So what are your expectations?
So high level, it's what I spoke to, this two funding a year. So $500,000 twice a year. We can go into those details, but really ensuring that our funding is impactful, looking for commitment, and looking for accountability. And I'm happy to, I don't know whether we want to start talking about potential terms, but we can.
I actually think, Sarah, given the time, if you could outline what you're looking for, I think that's important for this group to hear. I mean, we're not going to be talking about language, but if you can just tick off the elements that you would like to see and kind of what's in your mind at the resort, I think that would be very helpful for this group to hear so we know how to move forward.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'll just, Sarah, before you start, I'll
Yeah.
just kind of say a little bit of high level, our position, and then we can go into some of the details, right? What we're very mindful of is we're all here for the success of the RTA ultimately, right? And we recognize that our $1 million contribution alone is not going to be success for the larger RTA. And so making sure we've got the right milestones, the right plan, the right phasing, both in terms of financial and operational mechanics, if you will, for that success, and then having the appropriate language that allows for, if those milestones aren't being hit, what happens then, and trying to anticipate those scenarios and set those expectations up on the front end so that there's no surprises as we move forward. So I just wanted to share those comments as general, Sarah, before you go into some of the details.
Yeah, and I make just kind of one remark in that regard too, from a legal perspective. I would expect that there is no, these are not the sorts of requirements that are unexpected for that type of investment. And I think I'll speak for myself in this regard. I've been a little surprised we hadn't heard more about what those might be earlier. But I think our principal concern is obviously the substance of those requirements, but also that they're very clear. And as legal counsel, my concern is that there are some there's vague language that leads to dispute over whether it's happened or not, and the RTA can't rely on the funding that it's budgeting for.
I'd like to just jump in with a point of procedure before we keep moving forward. This is a consensus-based body, and I have not heard consensus that this group wants to renegotiate with Ski Corps yet. So I think that is point number one, is we have to make a decision about whether or not we are in a position to want to renegotiate what we've committed to. And then from there, we can take it forward. And I just want to reassure, especially our smaller jurisdictions, that Rouse County is extremely committed to a successful RTA, which means governance, service delivery. And, this contribution has been very important to that. As we all know, we have polled on it. We have sent this to thousands of households, explaining that this is a key part of the situation. 1 week ago, Sarah and I sat down with a public hearing and talked to the public about just how important this contribution was. We've been giving Ski Corps a whole lot of credit for allowing for this seed money and allowing for this to be successful. So I would argue that there's been quite a good set of publicity on this that has maybe turned around some of the impressions people have had of Ski Corps in the past. So the record is really clear that we've been talking about this for a very long time. I went back to the minutes of April 2nd. There was a very specific request that this be legally protected, this contribution. I will pop that in the chat from the minutes. It was followed up by Kaplan and Kirsch with a memo that indicated how that could happen. That memo was taken to the Board of County Commissioners. It satisfied their concerns that we were serious about this. And I'm really disheartened, Sarah, to hear you say that now for the first time that I've heard this RTA funding was somehow tied to the lift ticket tax, because we heard repeatedly that that was not the case. And I think the last time I was told that by one of your team, it was from Dave Hunter, who pulled me over at the Airport Operators Association on June 19th and was very proud to tell me that, you guys had been standing firm with the city and been saying that these two issues are not related and that you are committed to the $1 million. So, here we are. We have made a commitment to our voters. We've spent the past year building a coalition of people here, a consensus-based model that is allegedly going to move forward with a strong and robust program. We've been doing it under certain assumptions that have been stated and restated over the past year. So I think we need to poll the group about whether or not people are feeling like this is an appropriate conversation to have, and whether or not we are wanting to move forward. Rouse County, I have not had a chance to talk to my commissioners about the fact that it is sounding like we will not have the pledge agreement that we had believed we were going to have before we decided to move forward to the voters. So I haven't been able to ask them, if you do not get that pledge agreement that you have very specifically asked for forcefully over the past year, do you then want to continue to move forward in any way, shape, or form? So I would ask that we please get some consensus around whether or not we're going to go back to the drawing board on this negotiation and discussion. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Sonia, for bringing that point up. Then if that's your comfort level of wanting to go for this, why don't you start off the consensus with where you stand as far as the 6 jurisdictions wanting to negotiate or not further with the assumed pledge agreement that we're under. Where's the county stand on this?
I'd like to understand what is the timeline that we're talking about from the ski company. Basically, Bill has sent out a timeline for the jurisdictions to consider this situation. He has stretched out that timeline by at least 2 weeks. I think under the idea that hopefully we get to success. And so my question back to the ski company and Alterra is, will you be in a position to put something in writing that is legally binding regarding the contribution before the jurisdictions are hearing this at their meetings? So that's my one question. But then secondly, since we are a consensus-based model, I think it's important to hear from the other jurisdictions about how they feel about going back to the drawing board.
Okay, before we do that, I would like to give a little bit of clarity as far as what's the concern that we have right now. And if everyone on this call has, I've talked to a few of you, I think Bill has talked to a few of you, but at issue is this. When we have an IGA that's going to the different jurisdictions for their own approvals for the last agreement of the IGA, it has to have some funding mechanism. That funding mechanism says that as soon as if it passes in November, January 1, we have to have a fund set aside to start the authority. Up until now, the Ski Corps was committed to a pledge of $1 million that we were using in the IGA as proof of funding for this standing up of the RTA. If that is not the case, then we need to have a plan B, which is to do the IGA without Ski Corps, and then we have to have funding mechanisms from each one of the member jurisdictions during a percentage or such. So that's really the point at issue. What we ended up doing was talking to Craig and pushing back their 2 readings to a 1 reading approval for their IGA, as some of the other jurisdictions have already approved, or at least agreed to do in 1 reading. With that deadline, we give us a little bit more runway to continue with this negotiation, as you state. Right now, we're looking at the options. Polly and Kirsten are here to talk about where the IGA and how this funding mechanism needs to be in the IGA one way or the other, whether it's a pledge from Ski Corps or it's our jurisdictions all putting some money into a new fund. Those are the discussions that have to be in this agreement now. There's where the deadline is. And so with this change in this monkey wrench, we need to kind of identify and make sure that all the parties in this call are confident and firm moving forward. With that stated, I'm open to the other jurisdictions at least finding out with this information that if we don't agree to a pledge with Ski Corps, that our jurisdictions have to decide if we're moving forward with the RTA, and if so, how are we going to all put money in so that on January 1st, this thing can go and be an authority and move forward.
And I just
Molly,
want to do.
am I accurate in that? Am I accurate in that? Did I say anything wrong? Am I accurate in that explanation?
I think
No,
that was
that's
a
a good
good
explanation.
synthesis, Michael.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I was just, I do want to be clear that we're not backing out of our commitment.
Well, and
So-
we're committed to putting time, resources towards getting the pledge agreement finalized by the 20th, just to be absolutely clear, which is why we have Luke also on this call.
And that's why we did on our side, is to get us some runway. We recognized there were some issues that you guys needed to work with. We want to work together as a team and a partnership, but it did put some deadline issues at stake. So we've done what we could do based upon state statute to get this on the ballot, and we are now at the end of that runway. So within the next couple of weeks, if you guys feel confident about it, I think we can move forward. But with that, I just wanted everybody on the call to know what's at stake right now. Sarah, you were going to say something? Or Sonia, sorry.
No, I just think that, from a reality standpoint, it's good to hear that Roger has said that the Ski Corps is trying to be done by the 20th, or committing to being done by the 20th. Michael, to your point of funding from local governments, I could let Jay speak to that a little bit more, but I mean, I think honestly, let's remind ourselves that this group got cold feet about going to the ballot in April of last year because it was too soon. So if we couldn't go to the ballot with that much runway, Like, how are local governments going to now create and assemble a successful and sustainable funding mechanism with the time that we have, and then given that we are in the middle of budget season? I just don't see how that happens. But I really would like to hear from the other local governments if anybody has similar concerns.
Sure. Randy, Matt, Mayor Dobbins, Stacy, what are your thoughts?
From Craig's point of view, we don't have a concern with the time frame or of Craig making a commitment to it. My concern is that I don't want to do that unless Steamboat, the ski corps is definitely on. I mean, I don't have a problem with committing. We've done that in the past to start this organization, committing money to do that. It's just one, a question of how much are we talking, and two, I don't want to do that unless I know for sure that ski corps is going to commit $500,000 in January.
Actually, I think it's $1 million in January, is it not, Sarah?
That's what we're asking for is 500 in January, 500 in August.
Okay, so that's a back off from the original
Yeah, that's what
commitment of $1 million and then 500 thereafter.
It'll be $1 million per year, 500 in January, 500 in August.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sarah and Roger, you just made a statement, and I'm just confused at this point. So, is Ski Corps saying, yes, we will commit $1 million in 2026?
Yes.
In
Yes,
a pledge
is the
agreement.
answer.
What you are asking for is a detailed budget? I just, but from the conversation I had with Michael 2 days ago, that doesn't sound like the same thing. And as our conversation, which, I know things have changed over 2 days. So I'm just, if Ski Corps is saying, because that just makes me think, well, we always had that commitment in the first place. So I'm just really confused about like what you're asking for in the pledge agreement. If it's a more detailed budget, okay, 2 weeks to do a detailed budget, like I'm sure Bill could do that with costs and everything else pretty quickly. So
I think it's an
just explain
understanding.
what it takes here. How about maybe in simple terms? For Ski Corps to commit that $1 million that you guys have said that you were going to do for 2026, what does the pledge agreement have to have in it?
And we're happy to go through that. But as an example,
Yeah.
what happens in the situation where we have a formation that's passed, but the next year the funding mechanism isn't passed? What happens then with the pledge agreement? It's understanding some of those different scenarios, the what ifs, so that way, if that situation surfaces, we're all on the same page from the onset and not trying to figure it out as we go.
Well, hey, Roger, just a question. The onset, I think, was months ago. So I'm just curious as to, you're joining this call now with some pretty significant structural concerns that we've had a detrimental reliance on as a group. So I'm volunteering my time. I put a lot of time in on this. Everyone else on this call has volunteered their time with the understanding that these concerns that you're bringing up now were appropriate early on. So you're a new face to me. You're joining now with significant structural concerns. I couldn't run my business this way. And it's just, you can see why it feels a little bit like I'm being rolled here.
No, certainly I understand. And at least, I'll speak from my perspective, having just seen the pledge agreement literally on Monday, that's what's prompting this. So there's been, I think, the discrepancy that at least from my point of view, that's being identified is we've spoken very generally about the $1 million. And now we're at the point where it's in writing and the devil's in the details. And we're trying to make sure that we're crossing T's and dotting I's. And, as I mentioned earlier, we also have a fiduciary responsibility to our business. And so that's what's prompting a lot of this. I certainly recognize that having this conversation now, late in the game, is what's creating a lot of the frustration and angst with this group. But you can also recognize on our end, $1 million is a significant amount of money. And it's not that we're reneging on it. It's not that we're pulling away. We're committed to work through these things with this committee. But unfortunately, you're absolutely right. These are conversations that should have happened sooner and haven't. and we're
And I would suggest that of all the stakeholders on this group, we've probably committed at least $1 million in time over the past many months before you had these concerns, right? So if $1 million is a lot of money, just if we're laying that out there, you've already got on this group, this call has spent that easily just getting to this point. So just acknowledge that too would be great.
Well, let me just, so I think to expedite this, the reason I was asking, and I know maybe today is not the detailed day, so I get that. But what I think to get through the next 2 weeks, literally, I mean, this pushes it for the town of Hayden. This literally pushes to the day before we have to certify the ballot. Like, I'm like so nervous about that now. So a very like bullet pointed list of these are the concerns that have to be addressed like today or as soon as possible, I think would be helpful with an understanding that it is, yes, we're committing our $1 million. I mean, 500 in January and June. I don't know if I was concerned about that, but um that very detailed bullet point list, like we will commit our $1 million. These issues have to be outlined as to what will happen here, here, and here. I mean, I would agree, like, Roger, I understand, like, you're joining the fray now. So from a finance standpoint, like, if you didn't see it in any of this at all until Monday, shame on us. But like, just is what it is, right? Because all of us have been working on it forever. So that's where our frustration comes from. Um, so that's what I would request, like, because I just don't even know at this point what the
Well, it sounds to me, okay, so I don't know how your meeting went last night, Ski Corps, but clearly you've already stated that you're committing or willing to commit $1 million in the pledge for this IGA starting January of 2026 if it passes in the ballot. Okay, so that's the original agreement that we had, except we split it up into 500 and 500. I'm a little confused. Okay. What else are you guys wanting information on to commit to these funds so we can put this in the IGA? I still haven't heard specifics. We're still talking too general for me.
I think we haven't gone into specifics because we were going down the consensus suggestion. So I'm not sure how the sequencing we want to do this. If we want to go through those and the consensus.
Well, I mean, okay, so to help out with what Sarah says, if we wanted to look at, I'm willing to listen and talk about it. I'm not really a hard no with your negotiation. Randy, how do you feel about negotiating with Ski Corps? Do you want to listen to their part, or are we just going to hold them to what Sonia says the original negotiation?
I agree with Matthew. I don't have a problem negotiating. I just want to see ... What do you want? And I want to see it sooner than the 20th, if possible.
Oh, for sure.
Hey, what
Yeah,
about
and I'm
Mayor
going to
Dobbins
jump into
or
one more
Stacy?
thing about this, Michael. I mean, I think it's offensive for Ski Corps and Altera to suggest that they need to see skin in the game from local governments. I would ask you to please not use that term. We've been doing this for 2 years. We have put money into all of these efforts, and the town of Hayden and Routt County have committed to funding out of our Excel settlement. I personally have put hundreds of hours into securing other funds using this pledge as leverage. And so, we have a lot of skin in the game here. So that is not the problem.
Okay. Mayor Dobbins or Stacy, do you have some input, please?
Well, I would say at this point, I mean, I would like to hear what they have to say. I can honestly say that the town of Yampa, and we've had this conversation, Michael, and I know Sonia and I've had this conversation, we're, as Sonia said, we're starting our budget year, and to be able to find funds from Yampa to be able to help out in January is going to be very, very, very difficult at this point. Not that we probably wouldn't try to do it, but we have other capital outlays that are happening that are going to be an issue. So I think for the most part, yeah, we want to hear what Ski Corp has to say, and give us those bullet points. Those are what we need to hear. We need to know so that we can make an informed decision. But I also think that in terms of Sarah's been on all the calls, which I appreciate all the information she's given us. I just find it very hard to believe that you just now got the pledge that you're working with. That's very hard for me to understand that that's it's only been a week, and when we've been discussing this for over a year, and it's been in the making. So I think that that's something that needs to be rectified in later, obviously.
Claire. Ms. Dobbins?
Yeah, so being one of those smaller municipalities that has to lean into, we have to rely on the seed funding and assistance. I have been very clear from day one that our contributions, unfortunately, just because of our budgetary constraints, were going to be minimal, but that the impacts of the RTA could be very beneficial for our community. And I'm with Stacy on this. I'm just really shocked that we're at the last hour and we're now being asked for these specific details of how the funding is going to be appropriated. And at the same time, I'm coming to Ski Corps asking, okay, well, you're kind of playing that same thing with us. You're wanting to know how this funding is going to be spent, but yet you're not bringing forth to us the requirements of how they would like to see it spent. So it's like feeling like kind of tit for tat right now. And we don't have the ability to put skin in the game. But what I hope we can offer is affordable housing for Ski Corps as we're embarking in, affordable housing projects and, other aspects that are reliant on us being able to move forward with regional transportation. So I'm just really frustrated being a volunteer mayor and putting the hours of work in. We are right at the deadline and we're just now hearing this. It's heartbreaking, honestly. But that's about what I have to say about it right now. I am willing to listen. I mean, that's all I can do is listen.
Okay.
And I just hope that we have the ability to participate depending on what Ski Corps brings forward. So,
Thank you.
yep.
All right.
I
Well,
hope-
on a consensus base forward, Sonia, I appreciate you bringing that up, but it looks like we have people that would like to kind of hear what their offer is and kind of continue on this talk. So let's move on with some of the details.
Can I just,
that we can.
Michael,
Go ahead,
can I just,
Matthew.
yeah, can I just clarify? I think, for the town of Hayden, now that I'm hearing that we are committing the $1 million, we're saying we're going to do that, 2026. We want a detailed budget and we want some scenario if it doesn't pass or if it doesn't do whatever, those sorts of things. We want to see more detail on the pledge agreement. My request is going to be, because if it was like, oh, well, the $1 million now it's, 200,000 or whatever else, I would have had a difference of opinion here. But if that's what it is, then I would request, because I think I'm going to be the last entity to approve this now. So I would request that Ski Corps provide us from them every scenario and or bullet point you have concerns about to be worked out. And I would request that by early part of next week. And so that way we can work through as a group what that's going to say, what those conditions are, what if you are looking for funding from local governments, because we have been in our budget process and as smaller entities, I don't need to repeat what they've said, Obviously we're bigger than Oak Creek and we've committed funds, but still we're definitely not Steamboat, definitely not Route County, or City of Craig or whatever. So please just provide that expeditiously.
I think,
and
I don't want to,
on from there.
yeah, I don't want to speak for Sarah or Luke, but I think we're prepared to even by end of today, anticipating and wanting to support and move this forward quickly and not create delays. But
sounds great.
Or Sarah, if I'm misspeaking, please.
No, I'm happy to, I think we're happy to
Yeah.
speak to what it is, the points that that we would like to see. So.
And some of you guys Jay, you unmuted. Please speak up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just two quick things that I wanted to mention. One, even though we have these hard deadlines with the county clerk, there's some professional courtesy to let her know that if this isn't going to move forward, because there's a lot of work once we provide notice that we did a couple weeks ago that we're moving forward with this. So if this doesn't appear to be moving to the ballot, we need to let her know and not wait till that last date. That's just a hard statutory date. Ballot layout, costs, sharing on other elections, all that ties into this. And, if this does change the course, we can't wait till that drop dead date. The other thing I just wanted to lay out there also for Roger is that from Routt County, we are investing the largest investment in the history of Routt County into regional transportation right now. It's a $75 million expansion of the airport, which is the vast majority of your destination skiers are coming through with no ski corps contribution because we looked at the RTA as the mechanism for helping on things. So I just wanted to, throw that out there that there's not a lack of investment in regional transportation. It's targeted to other pieces of the model outside of what's right now in the RTA. And then please be respectful of our clerk. There's more election issues going on than anyone could have any idea of right now. Just the open records requests on a daily basis. So we can't add stress to that office by taking this to the deadline. So just 2 comments and I'll pass it back to you.
Jay, thank you very much for bringing that new information and definitely a neat perspective that we go forward. Okay. So now we got through that. We're going to talk about what the specifics are. How would you guys like to move forward with this? You want to give some details? Bill, what do you think?
I think that's warranted right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, are
So
you ready for me to hit on?
I think we are because we've talked nothing new except for $1 million next year. So you guys ready to sign that pledge? What are your specifics? Let's talk about specifics.
Okay, so again, 2 installments of $500,000, January 1, August 1, first year, as well as the remaining years. I think we're looking for termination if it's not established on January 1, 2026. It ceases to exist. These are not crazy. We would like some looking at what does the budget, I know we don't have a seat at the table, but understanding where is the money going. So whether that's a, current budget funding spent, kind of the, looking at the SST contribution, kind of that annual reporting. So we're
Do you need
understanding.
a resolve for $1 million in that budget or just what the administrative costs for the stand-up will cost this first year?
I think this is not when we're looking at this pledge agreement, obviously we're looking across the 20 years. So this is
Okay.
not something that we're like, okay, this is what we need in the first year. This is looking over the full 20-year term. So
Okay.
some
Keep
kind
going.
of,
So 20-year budget by next week, is that
No,
the
no,
request?
that's what I'm
No.
just.
Okay.
Well,
no, that's
Yeah.
not what we're asking for. We're not asking for a 20-year budget. What we're asking for is understanding annually budget costs, what is the funding going towards? Just some understanding, because we don't have a seat at the table, we're not involved in kind of those budget decisions. So we can justify to our internal stakeholders that our money is going to a good investment. That's all, we're looking for, just a reporting.
So just an annual budget at the beginning of the year and
Yeah.
and an annual report on
Yes.
use of funds by end of year.
That's
Yes. We spoke to the 3 years for the SST. So receiving additional funding sources sufficient to assume responsibility of SST regional transportation in 3 years. If the transit authority ceases to receive additional funding, services thereafter would be, which that's the same language that we've had in the previous draft. And then we're looking at some kind of, as we, some minimum, like we want to be seeing this growing. So some kind of accountability that we have some regional service levels and that they continue to grow. And obviously it's important for us. We're looking at this for our employees and getting to the resort. Currently, the regional transit goes to Ski Corps. We would like to continue to have that regional transit, that bus go to have a stop at Ski Corps. So that's important to us. And then some kind of, if there is we want to see continual expansion or increase in service. So if by some date 2030, we're not seeing that expansion in service, we want there to be an ability for us for an out there. If the transit authority ends, we would like, and there's after payment, whatever it ends, and there's payment due, etc. If there is additional funding of ours left from that, we'd like to be paid back that funding. And then we'd like some kind of if we have business disruption, right? We're seeing right now that there are wildfires. If for some reason our operations either we cannot open, think COVID, or we have some large impact to our operations, we would like to be able to have some either stop payment or some modification of payment based on our what we're able to produce for operations.
So like in
That's-
our agreement that we have with the city, you
Yeah.
have a clause that
Yes.
said if an act of God or such, that the year's
Right.
payment
Yeah.
would be delayed or
Business
deferred.
business disruption.
Right,
Yeah, I'd
okay.
like to jump in with just another procedural issue here, which is that this group has consistently discussed the idea that getting through formation, on the other side of it, then a board becomes seated. That board then does the work of going out to the communities on sort of a micro level planning to determine what is needed by those communities, service wise. I mean, so we have always discussed that the $1 million from Ski Corps would be to stand up the RTA, and we had ballparked that at 250 to 300,000. We had also discussed some form of enhanced services that would help immediately demonstrate success to our communities. So I would like to better understand, and I'd love to see it in writing, what is the expectation of level of detail that you would like to see about year one expenditures? And what is your clear expectation moving forward? Because, we had all agreed in this group, again, with our consensus-based model, that the RTA board is going to be the determinant of the type of service that is there, of the level of service that is there. It's hard for me to sit here and think that I can commit to a continual expansion year over year. I mean, that I don't understand how anybody can commit to that, knowing that this is not our group. And if that's your off ramp, then I mean, that's
no. So we're not looking for it to grow. So remembering this is the 20-year pledge. So what we're trying to get in now is not like exactly what it looks like in year one, but it's what it looks like over 20 years. And we're not saying like we expect a year over year growth, but we do have some expectation of by 2030, by whatever the year is, that has been some build out of robust service.
As an example, not saying that this is the goal of anybody on this call, but our $1 million is not supporting one route, one line for 20 years, but that for the success of the RTA, that it's growing with different routes, different times of day, and other funding contributions. So it's really memorializing in writing for all of us. And I know the IGA does some of that, but with this being our commitment, understanding that we're aligned, that the anticipation is growth over time.
But I think that commitment would be with the entity that doesn't exist until the post-ballot scenario, right? So just from a purely legalistic approach here, on this pledge, you're asking an entity to make commitments when that entity's existence is predicated upon a successful ballot. So like, there's no entity that can actually commit to what you're asking here until the voters determine that's the case, right? So
right, absolutely, and we're not. That's why our first bullet is formation It has to form.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be a recognition that we are committing $1 million a year. We recognize we are not a government entity, so we don't have a seat at the table in those decision-making process. And yet we have goals that we're trying to achieve as an employer in our community. So we want some kind of, for a 20-year commitment, we want to make sure that we're building out a robust, recognizing that it's a government entity, recognizing that we don't have a seat at the table, recognizing that you have constraints that we don't have. How do we give ourselves the comfort level of this commitment over 20 years?
I guess, can I
Sure.
ask a technical question to the attorneys on the call, which is in the ballot language, creating the RTA, could we create a seat? It wouldn't be described representing Altera, but could we create a seat on it for a business interest? And then, of course, determine who makes that appointment from the jurisdictions there. I mean, if there's a broad concern from Steamboat, Ski Corp, that they don't have a seat on their table, I think we have the levers within the language to open up a seat.
I can respond to that. We can't give them a board position, but we have the ability to establish advisory committees. And for example, the Eco-Transit Board sat as an advisory committee under the IGA in Eagle County. So we could absolutely form an advisory committee of, business interests that would advise the RTA board, of which Ski Corps could be designated as a, kind of a required seat. So we can absolutely do that. And that's something that can be done, through the IGA and would be approved as through the ballot language by reference to the IGA. From a technical
these
perspective.
are the kinds of hasty discussions and decisions that have very significant impacts. And it's really very challenging for me to believe that we have come this far as a coalition, having signed our IGA to work on this together on the 30th of August of last year. And now we're talking about changing the governance structure, adding seats. Like, this is not the time for that. Ski Corps, I understand that you want to see things that you have not previously asked for, but I'm just going to ask that please put that in writing. Give us a fill in the blanks so that we can help you understand that our intentions, as we have put them out there, are good. We are working our asses off to get this done. Everybody knows that we want the same thing, which is to have a successful program. I wouldn't be here. I mean, how many times have we come close to not getting to a successful program, right? We're all in this together. So tell us what you need specifically, fill in the blanks. I am not eager to open up the governance model. We spent the first part of 2025 on that. I went back to the minutes and looked at it. We put in place specific things for specific reasons to provide certainty to our smaller communities in particular. And that was a thoughtful and a thorough discussion, and that's how they should be. So, if it's about service and delivery and robust transportation, that's fine. If you are making requests for governance influence, that's a different request. And we just need to be clear on what the ask is. I don't think we should be offering to change anything related to governance at this point in time myself.
To be clear, that's not our ask here.
And thank you, Sonia, for bringing that up. Yeah, I think all of us are going to end up waiting. We're going to keep this conversation going, but we're going to end up getting something from you, Ski Corps, of these specific bullet points that everyone's asking. And I hope that doesn't change after this next run of our draft, because we're ready. Okay. So anyway, let's keep talking. What else, Sarah?
That's it. That's what we're asking for.
So you guys, so it's been tossed about that the matching funds from the municipal governance starting January 1. You're not interested in having that requirement, so we can put the ease, Stacy and Melissa Dobbins, that your budgets can stay put. We don't need to ask you for more funding. Is that accurate?
That's right. We're not asking for any match funding or anything like that with these changes.
And so
we're not-
specifically
yeah.
what you're looking for, what you're looking for is in a 20-year commitment, a pledge that's in the IGA, you're wanting to have that figured out this next week, and you're still committing $1 million that we can put as a pledge. What you're looking for is some specific bullet points that give you comfort in case this goes sideways, doesn't get pledged, we don't do a funding mechanism in 2026. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Well, Polly?
I think that, again, none of these conditions are difficult to draft. I think the ones that become a little bit dicey are your commitment, is the commitment you're requesting to some level of growth in service, and how we gauge that. And, I guess the question is whether you're prepared to give us some examples of what you had in mind, or whether you want to, take this to a separate discussion after that initial draft is done.
So Ski Corps, you recognize that any service that you're wanting to add differently than now really needs to be spoken by the new formed board, correct? So any request that you give us, we're probably going to say no, because it has to be decided upon by the Yampa Valley Regional Authority and that board that sits. So in that context, do you feel confident that you will have a comfort level telling us what those service requirements or requests are, but you're not going to get an answer for this IGA? Do you understand that?
Yes, yes, I think we do, Michael. I think what we're looking for, again, is, and we can frame it in different ways, but again, what we're looking for is it's commitment and service. So, right. So we just want to, I think in some of the, the latest conversations around funding have been, very much of like, we have this $1 million, we're good. And it's like, this is just the start. And we want to make sure that we're not the only ones at the table providing funding, and we're not the only ones who are with, again, I don't want to change. We're not looking to change the structure in the IGA. What we're trying to do is set this up. So in this pledge agreement, we are showing our commitment to this robust service, and we're asking for some commitment from all other stakeholders on this commitment. So we're not looking for very specific, like it has to be X number of buses going X number. We're saying like, we want to see service growing and providing what is needed in our community.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Stacy.
So, Sarah, you said that you wanted to see the expansion by 2030. My biggest concern is the fact, or growth. My biggest concern is the fact that you're putting a year to that. When I know, and Bill, please correct me if I'm wrong, when we first started all of this, Bill said that even though Eagle got started, it took a couple years to get it up and running, and then it took a couple more years before they actually started to see any growth. My concern is that you're putting a year on us that we're going to
Yes.
have to meet, and I don't know that that's a fair way to do that.
So just real quick, Eagle probably is not the best case study for us to look at. It's probably San Miguel Smart, because they started with pretty much nothing, or just a small in-town Telluride system. So that would probably be a very good example. Eagle had a very large, robust system. So, but we could look at Smart and see what it took for them to start to add service. But they also got a tax, so they had that funding right away.
And Stacy, to be clear, I just, it was like a date. And if there's a way that we can, we use the 3 years related to the taking over the SST, that's a date that we can use. I think it's, and we're open to discussion of like, what is the comfort level? There has to be more than just like, we'll try, but what is the comfort level of showing that commitment? That's what we're looking, that's the intent of that request, is just,
But
and
I
Are
think
you
you have
looking?
18 people here that are telling you we are committed and we've shown that we've been committed. I get that what you're asking for 100%. I think that by asking for an actual year,
Yeah.
date, whatever, you're setting us up kind of for failure in a way by saying, okay, so we get the vote passed and then in 2026, and then in 3 to 4 years, you're wanting it to see some growth when we barely are going to be up and running to get to that point. So I feel like that wording needs to be different than what you're asking for.
Ultimately, what we're trying to achieve on our end is that if for whatever reason, the money, the $1 million that we're contributing every year, nothing's happening with it. It's just accumulating. What happens then? And trying, again, with a 20-year agreement, a lot can change, a lot can happen that can't be predicted today. And trying to anticipate what mechanisms are in place so that we're all aligned and not trying to figure it out at that point in time, that should that scenario present itself, we're all kind of looking at each other. So that's the ultimate intention here. It is not to put hamstring the RTA in any way or to prevent its growth or not have it be successful. We're all like-minded and committed towards that. And I can certainly appreciate with this ask coming from us at this late hour that that's how it could be perceived. But I just want to be very clear of what we're trying to achieve from our side.
And from an investment perspective, it's maybe it's, if we're right, I hope that by 2030, 2030 is a year, random year, just choosing, but I hope by 2030, that's 4.5 years away. So I do hope that we have expanded service by 2030, but we also want the ability that if nothing is happening, we need an out so that we can take that money and invest it in a different way. And so if we're only continuing with the current service that's going from Craig to Steamboat, there's no Craig circulator, there's none of that. We want to be able to say like, wow, maybe there needs to be a different way that we should be investing this money that's impactful and benefits us and our community. And that's at the end of the day, it's even if it's we recognize that everybody is committed, and we're not saying that, but we need just some commitment or some kind of metrics that will show us that success.
Sarah, let's recall that the RTA is not just service, it's also capital. There are also capital expenditures and investments that we've considered, safety improvements along Highway 40.
Right.
So we need to hear from you whether or not those are the types of things that demonstrate that we're actually following through on the commitments. There are 8 objectives that we've all agreed to about what this delivery looks like. So it's not just service. So,
right.
Is the fact that we are investing in, let's just say, a park and ride or our safety improvements on Highway 40. I mean, when the RTA begins to initiate projects that fulfill the 8 service objectives, is that sufficient to show that actually it is operational and moving forward on its commitments?
I think progress on our goals. And maybe that's the language, is progress on the goals outlined in the IGA.
That's reasonable.
But before we hop off, Sarah, I think all of us thought you were speaking for the resort. And I know, Paul, you've been talking to some people at the resort, but Roger and Sarah, we're really under constraints here time-wise. Is it you two that are going to be able to sign off on whatever is proposed? Or are we going to see additional people that have to weigh in on this from the resort side?
You won't see additional people that have to weigh in. Ultimately, Dave Hunter, the president, will sign off, but he'll be signing off on our recommendation.
Well, thank you for being here.
And that's why we have Luke here as well, just to help us what we are talking about today to translate that.
So, Sarah, should we expect from you a new draft of the pledge agreement this evening with these additional terms outlined?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think we're at a point where we're agreeing to listen to Ski Corps' new bullet points requirements. We'll put that in kind of your pledge agreement. As soon as you get that to Kirsten and Polly and Bill, they'll send it out to the rest of the formation for us to review, and then we can evaluate the proposal and the agreement so we can get on a positive note and kind of get this thing over the finish line. I'm feeling more encouraged now than I did an hour ago. Didn't know what direction this would be. I don't know how everyone else feels, but at least we know that we have a tight deadline, but we have movement, and I think we're all willing to work together. Is there anything more on this topic before Bill goes on some other agendas? Yes, Bill.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to do those other agendas.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I didn't want to close up. There was a couple other letters that we did put in, or documents that he had to review and go over, since we made some changes and he wants to go through those. But again, I don't want to short the conversation right now with everybody that's on here. If there's things that you're needed to say to get more clarity of what the expectation is of Ski Corps, speak now, or let's wait until they get their document. It's up to you, but I don't want to stifle anyone's conversation at this point. So please raise your hand or speak up.
I'll speak up, Michael. I'm gonna have to jump because I have had a commitment for the past year to be elsewhere, and I just decided to hop on to make sure that we were part of this important discussion. My request is that since people are leaving and have left, this is the end point of this discussion on this call. We have come to a place of agreement as to next steps, and I would ask that this group not revisit it in the absence of the people who do need to leave at 9. Thanks.
Sounds good. Bill, would you go through your other quick agenda items then?
You know, I don't even need to really bring them up. I'll just tell everybody what's there. You've seen it. There's two pieces I added to last night's reminder. Worked with Tanya Allen at Eco Transit or at EVTA/Core Transit. Can't keep it all straight. And she did go through her initial first year budget and helped us put together a memo so we can understand what it will cost to administratively start our RTA in 2026. So there's no need to go through that together. Just it's there to read. It is what it is. Number two is I put out a revised schedule of IGA approval/referral, and that's out there. But I've talked to every jurisdiction, whether it's the clerk or the mayor or a council member and or a city manager, town manager, and we're pretty solid there on that schedule. So kind of we have until the 20th to get this done, but it can't go farther than that. That's it.
Should we
Okay.
set
Right.
we
That's
should
the last
probably
thing.
we should probably be meeting again, Bill, early next week.
Well, yes, I think I like Sarah's idea of maybe a subcommittee getting together to kind of work through the final details, and then putting a full committee meeting on the agenda for the second half of the week. But I'll take anyone's guidance. I'm just the facilitator here.
Well, I think that based upon what Sonia said, she wants to keep it more of this group. So if we do a smaller group, please make sure she's included in that group.
Yeah. Okay. Let me put out some dates and times for meetings and we'll see. I know the county commissioners have Monday, Tuesdays all day, so that makes early next week kind of tough. So, and I believe it's still on, but there's a joint meeting between Steamboat Springs City Council and the Routt County Commissioners that I'm attending for an RTA update. So that's going to be kind of important as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's gonna, I mean, Sarah and Luke, and I appreciate it, you guys. We are having this joint meeting with the county on Monday. It's been scheduled, and specifically Bill was coming up for an RTA update. I would just like to see if we can work through something that we could have a little bit more positive thing to say on the 1 o'clock meeting on Monday. I don't want to put any pressure on you guys, but the sooner you get us what you're thinking, we can present that to both all city council and county commissioners at the same time. So you're going to get a good buyout or lease discussion on that. And that will help drive our discussion for us two entities going into early Wednesday or Thursday for a formation committee gathering. But at least we'll hear from our councils and commissioners on how they feel about this negotiation with the pledge.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Luke, but I think we are, well, maybe I should let Luke speak on schedule. I think we can get a red line to you today. Is that possible, Luke?
I believe so. Yeah. I don't have anything else going on. This is obviously my top priority at the moment. So,
One just remark. I think that what came out, at least to me very clearly from this discussion, is that our conditions about growth are going to be probably the most sensitive of the terms you outlined. And I think the objective as you're drafting, Luke, is to try to think about how to be sufficiently precise in what you're looking for, that we aren't arguing about it and this funding is reliable. And alternatively, not to be so precise that we can't satisfy your objective in a number of different ways.
And perhaps it's referring to the goals outlined in the IGA. And
yeah, I think that and again, in that reference with those kind of that balancing act in mind.
Okay.
All right. I will get some dates, times out to the group to try and get our probably two meetings at least on our schedules. So look for that shortly.
Cool. All right, you guys, thank you all. If there's not anything further ado, I will let us all get on to those projects. And much appreciated your early morning meeting. And I feel confident that we're going to get over the finish line and have Ski Corps part of the IGA with their pledge agreement. Positive expectation. Thanks, you guys.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, come on.